Soon, Atlanta voters will have to answer if they think the city should become a destination for gambling. The Atlanta City Council approved a measure to put questions on its upcoming ballot. It reads, if the state of Georgia legalizes gambling, should Atlanta be considered a possible destination location? And it could appear on ballots as early as March of next year. The president of the Atlanta Motor Speedway thinks there is an appetite for gambling in Georgia. Last month, Ed Clark put out renderings for a $1 billion casino at the Speedway that would include hotel and condos and water parks. He says it could create up to 5,000 permanent jobs. Now, the question is whether state lawmakers will jump on board or not, with similar measures failing in the past. You can read more about the proposal, which gets a lot of people talking, pros and cons, to see which measures are on today's ballots over on 11alive.com. We'll also be posting results there as they come in tonight from the races today.